Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm WWAY meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with your Storm Track 3 forecast. Comfortable conditions in store for us from start to finish. Lots of sunshine on the way, along with lower humidity and highs reaching the middle 80s inland of the coast, low to middle 80s along the immediate coastline. And we're going to stay dry and quiet throughout the next couple of days thanks to high pressure and full control of our weather pattern. As for tonight, cooler temperatures on the way, dropping down into the low 60s inland of the coast. Coastal areas falling down into the middle and upper 60s. Get your full forecast on WWAY and WWAYTV3.com.
This news and weather is brought to you by Two Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to twomenandatruck.com. twomenandatruck.com.
Join Big Talker Network is as easy as asking for it. Program your digital home assistants such as Google Home, Alexa, and Siri to stream Big Talker Network content by simple voice command. Enjoy convenient hands-free access to the program whenever you want, however you want by asking for Big Talker.
Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, located at 8210 River Road, Southport, is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, with the Tackle Box open Monday through Saturday, 7 to 6. Marine Service Pro is a full Suzuki and Tohatsu dealership. They deal in pre-owned boats, full service and repair, with certified technicians in all engines, and fiberglass specialists. The Tackle Box offers fresh, local seafood, live bait, a tackle shop, and fish packing and shipping. They also offer a full-service U-Haul dealership. Spend time with Leon or Jenny for one-stop shopping at Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, 8210 River Road, Southport.
Please stand by.
We now take you live to the Institute of Rational Thought for a special broadcast. Hard-hitting interviews and relevant information to make your day. It's Chad Adams.
It is an understatement to say that a lot has changed since last you were here. Sun coming up in the east, same. Weather, absolutely gorgeous. In fact, today in the studio here, I have the windows open to get a beautiful cross breeze here. No AC. You know, the roads still work, your cars still function, but there's been a ground shift in ludicrousness. And it was really big yesterday. So after the show, we discussed this yesterday in the beginning of the show. You know, the market futures were looking great. You know, there was an inflation report that was supposed to have dropped it down below around 8.1 at an annualized rate. And that was supposed that was supposed to be good news. But that's not what happened. Inflation went up, not down. After the Democrats have passed the Inflation Reduction Act, inflation went up. So then at that point in time, the optimism before the markets opened quickly receded, and it was a bloodbath. It's like that bad horror movie where they walk into a nice scene, and then it's the zombie apocalypse at the same time, and there's just bloodletting everywhere. And that's what happened. It was an absolute bloodbath yesterday. I think the Dow ultimately was off about, 1,200 points. The NASDAQ, all of the indices everywhere where America went. In fact, it was off almost 1,300 points at one point. It finished down just shy of 4%. So if any of you had, your savings out there, your 401ks, your IRAs, your Roths, you had a bad day. Now, as a former broker, I would say, don't panic. As long as you don't need it right now, leave it there. But you can't. You can't have it both ways. You can't say the Inflation Reduction Act is making a profound difference and then have what happened yesterday. And it was made worse by the absolute pontification about the greatness of this, even as it's like that popular meme on Twitter, or anywhere else for that matter, where it's the Leslie Nielsen from Police Squad years ago, where the fireworks factory is on fire in the background and things are exploding and blowing up everywhere. And he looks at he's looking at the press saying, there's really nothing to see here. And that's exactly what happened. Kind of for the first time in U.S. history, you had an entire administration celebrating. They had James Taylor playing songs at the White House as Democrats were crooning about the success of the Inflation Reduction Act, even as the markets were tanking in record form yesterday. I mean, not since like 82 have we seen things like this. Unbelievable. But nothing. I mean, that's just the markets. We've never seen a president in this kind of denial. Well, unless you count Bill Clinton's, I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. But that's different. That was a personal thing with he and an intern fiddle-faddling in the White House versus the entire U.S. economy in free fall while the president is crowing about how great it is. Here's one. I'm just going to, they were live tweeting this. As the markets were crashing, the president's team was live tweeting as if it was him. Here's one of them. This is a great one. The progress that comes with the Inflation Reduction Act was declared a failure before it was a success. But we didn't give up. We had a vision, a plan, and we stuck to it. And the result is we're getting the job done. Now, this is, and inflation is not under control. And as people look ahead, and now the housing market's iffy, it's a train wreck. The hour before that one, the Inflation Reduction Act delivers on promises that have been made to Americans for decades. Congressional Republicans chose not to join us, so it fell to the rest of us to meet this moment and deliver for families, and that's exactly what we did. Now, if I were someone creating commercials for Republicans this fall, I would take these tweets and I would put them on a screen juxtaposed with the markets absolutely crashing and tanking. And saying, no, we didn't vote to destroy the economy. The Democrats voted to destroy the economy. In fact, it was this. There were enough headwinds. We should have come out of this COVID fascist lockdown moment. And it should have been, for Democrats, it should have been a golden era. And I mean that. All the Democrats had to do was get things opened back up, get the supply chain fixed, and things were looking up. It was a great reason to be optimistic about the future. It was a great time to get the shipping lanes open, to get the products back in, to get people back in factories, to get people back shopping, having vacations, to get them doing all of those things. But instead, it became a very left-leaning, I'm an understatement. It became a progressive dream. And the progressive dream went something like this. The first thing he did was shut down the pipeline from Canada to the U.S. Now, people can argue about the impact it would have had, but it was 15,000 jobs. It was a great PR thing. It would have been a much safer to move it through a pipe than across through railroad cars and trucks in all sorts of places. Nonetheless, leave it alone. The Keystone Pipeline, let it go. But they did shut that down, declared war on energy, started pushing for things that would make energy infinitely more difficult. We went from energy independence, which means on the global market, we were able to produce more than we used, even though it was a global market, but it helped keep prices. It made us competitive and kept prices low. Once you become less energy independent and strictly go after oil and gas companies, guess what? America was no longer as competitive on the global market, and prices went up, dramatically up. You couldn't keep the shipping lanes. You could not keep shipping going. The global economy became more unstable. Afghanistan was an absolute train wreck. You left $80 billion worth of good American hardware on the ground for a Taliban regime to take over. Afghanistan's worse off. Iran is more unstable. The Russians invaded Ukraine. There's zero respect for this administration now because of the green energy initiatives of Europe. They're getting ready to face a winter that makes Game of Thrones look like a walk in the park. Everything the progressives have done have progressively made things worse. Everything. The border, we have, again, with the border, all the Biden administration had to do was say, we're not going to do what Trump did. That's fine. That's the progressive. They hate Trump. That's fine. But all they had to do was say, we're going to make the border a second to none with respect to security. We're going to make sure that the southern border is not porous. We're going to shut down the cartels. We're going to make sure we protect all of Americans that live there and the rest of America. But instead, just the opposite happened. You stopped you had all the stuff ready to just put up. You stopped doing that. And then because of your policies, you progressive lefty, absolute asinine, insane lefties, you just stopped enforcing the border, and you invited Central and South America to come across. And you said you're going to stop doing what Trump did. That told everybody in the world, this is the place to come across. Chinese nationals, everyone, Indonesians, 138 different countries sent people to Mexico to come across our border. Not because they're seeking asylum. They're seeking a better way of life. They're seeking to be happier. They're seeking to be joyous. They're seeking to be, they're absolutely ecstatic. And then all the Democrats in your sanctuary cities, this is even more bizarre. So Democrats have all these sanctuary cities, well, that's great. They're not on the border. So the minute those immigrants start arriving in your sanctuary cities, Democrats lose their ever-loving minds. Oh my God, how dare you? How dare you politicize immigration? No. What do you mean? You guys politicize it by creating something that didn't need to be created. And you're defund the police movement that you're trying to run away from like a burning building. That's resulted in towns, cities like Asheville, North Carolina, being in an absolute tailspin. Chicago, LA, New York. Cash bail release, no bail. Not enforcing certain laws. You don't have the staff to do it. Record numbers of departures from law enforcement agencies across the country in your cities. You guys took what was you took a win. You know what? The U.S. economy was ready to be a 21-0 victory. It was ready to be a great, let's just put it in football terms. It was you had the ball, you had a lead and the ball first and goal on the 1 yard line with an overwhelming offense. And somehow you fumbled it like Seattle on the 1 inch line twice in 2 possessions. But that's a different story. You fumbled the ball. The other team runs it back for a touchdown, meaning everything that's against America runs it back. You actually made a great cheer for America, make America great again. Why couldn't you just take that to the next level and say, we're going to make America even greater? Make America even greater. Create your own movement. But no, you demonized Make America Great Again because somehow that's bad. And you've tried to make America Great Again a symbol for domestic terrorism. Meanwhile, you tried to crush parental dissent about what was happening at school boards. You actually hired a guy that slipped out and said that parents were domestic terrorists for caring about their kids. It's just impossible to reconcile all of these things and say, is that really what you intend to do? And it is. You didn't even try to cover it up. But what you did do was you just lied. And you guys that get all upset about Donald Trump's lies and misleading the world, look at what you guys have done. Your press secretary, Jean-Pierre, is answering questions about the border that are just simply untrue. She said that people aren't walking across the border. There's not a problem down there. The border is more secure than ever. The vice president had said that. These are just lies. And you know what, the media, here's what amazed me about even the press conference yesterday. The press is sitting in there. They confront the press secretary, not Fox News, not Ducey, who's doing Ducey should get an Edward R. Murrow Award for honesty in the White House. But now other reporters from other places are asking. And with a straight face, they listen to these lies that they know are lies. Jean-Pierre should be laughed out of office. She has that job for 2 reasons. I'm not going to say them on air. Everyone who hears me say this knows I'm telling the truth. She's there for 2 reasons. She's incompetent, she's incapable, she's unprepared, and she knows she has job security for those 2 reasons. And so we have a press corps that should be laughing at her and this administration. We have members of the media that this administration is an absolute laughingstock, and they know it. They know it. That's why Joe Biden will not be the nominee in 24. And I'm not even that great. I'm not trying to be a prognosticator of future events in politics. You don't have to be. He's a train wreck. I mean, on at least 3 dozen occasions, he's kind of lost as to where he's supposed to be on stage. He gets lost in his words. His wife has to pull him back from the media at different times. Here's the reality. I'm surprised, and so are you, that we're not worse off with what the hell's going on. It's an absolute, unmitigated, I would love to laugh at it because it's comical, but the implications and the consequences of their actions are just insane. Chucky Schumer yesterday was crowing about how great the Inflation Reduction Act, even as the markets were tanking. But the Biden stuff was almost hourly. 16 hours ago, the Inflation Reduction Act is what it looks like when government works for the people. Markets are tanking. And when we tell powerful special interests, no, you're not getting in the way. Not this time, not this year, not now. Train wreck yesterday. The economy, free fall. Tune in as I deliver remarks celebrating the Inflation Reduction Act and how it demonstrates government working for the American people. No, government's working against the American people. It's not working for them. If it was working for them, it would get out of the way. It would get out of the way. But it's not. And the Democrats' desire to push an agenda and then tell you, they've handed you a chocolate cake that is filled with nails. It is made with salt instead of sugar, and they have put dressing on it. They've put, I don't know, coffee grounds mixed with, I don't know, stale, putrid milk, and that's the icing they put on this cake, and they're giving it to the American people and saying, look at this great cake we made for you. It's delicious. Aren't you glad we're here for you? And I just, look at what we accomplished together, the president. These are all tweets yesterday. While today's data shows progress, and here's what it's even funnier. Even as you and I knew that inflation had gone up and the report had been released, the Biden administration released a statement. It's clear that they had all of these pre-written and they released them as a script, thinking. And nobody at the White House. Nobody. And this should terrify you because these are the people that are supposed to protect us from threats, foreign and domestic, who have told you all sorts of a throne of lies in Will Ferrell's way of looking at things. Today's data. Now, see, so in the inflation numbers came out, they were worse than expected. Inflation was rising, not diminishing. And the president said, today's data shows progress in fighting inflation. This month, prices overall were essentially flat. Gas prices were down and wages were up. That's good news. Nobody believed it. Nobody in the markets believed it. It was an absolute bloodbath sell-off. Nobody. And that when the American public has zero confidence in their president, that's what it looks like. What's even funnier is if you think about when the president's now I want you to put this in perspective. The president is selling off a million gallons or 1 million barrels a day from the strategic petroleum reserves. He's drawing down our strategic petroleum reserves. You're supposed to do that in times of actual crisis, not self-inflicted crisis. But he's selling that off. That ends soon. That is one of the things that has artificially dampened. So when he says gas prices are down, that's not because the market forces are making it down. It's because he's trying to flood the market with gas to make the price stay lower. And it ends soon. So if inflation's going up, even though he's putting 1 million gallons of strategic, 1 million barrels of strategic petroleum on the open market, when that ends, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think it's going to get better? Do you think this gets better when that ends? And it's ending, I think, in the next 20 days or next 15 days or so. I don't know the exact date. I don't have it in front of me. All of it, all of these. And today, exactly 4 weeks ago, I signed the Inflation Reduction Act. So today we're celebrating, he wrote. And it's everything about it. Everything about it has not worked. And then the student loan program. Now Democrats are getting kind of scared about the student loan program. They've crowed about it. But everything they're saying right now is an absolute lie. And to show this, to kind of illustrate this, you can just go to Real Clear Politics, which is, again, it's an aggregator of a bunch of different opinions out there. And you can tell the headlines. The headlines usually are somewhat balanced. You know, they give a little bit of shade to the Republicans, a little bit of shade to the Democrats, and it goes through and you can read different versions of people's realities. But today's was not good for Democrats in any way. And it's unbelievable. Even, and polling is going to reflect that. The Democrats have this optimism that is quickly fading. The reality of what the Democrats have done that August, the ebullience that joined August for them was all based on vapor. It was not real. The reality of what the Democrats have done to this nation is coming home to roost, and this is going to start crushing them. Their only hope was abortion, and we'll talk about the abortion because Lindsey Graham did something yesterday that we can have a great discussion about because the way, and you can tell how desperate the Democrats are because of their reaction to what Lindsey Graham did. I say that as I try to have some volume in my ears here. Shocking. Here are the headlines. I'm just going to give you the headlines, and it'll give you a taste for what's happening across the country from an opinion standpoint. Larry Kudlow has a piece. Shocking report shows inflation is here to stay. He's absolutely right. That's not even debatable. Fed's war on inflation may take the U.S. economy down with it. Wait, may take? You can't imagine where we are now, and the economy could go down from here. And that's from CNN. A columnist with CNN wrote that. The next headline, voters must make Dems pay for out-of-control crime. That's a Tucker Carlson piece, not a surprise. But the out-of-control crime is a problem for Democrats across this country in city after city after city, including North Carolina. But again, we don't have municipal elections this year. So it's a train wreck on top of a train wreck. Next year can be addressed. Why tougher prison sentences won't reduce crime. Fitzger, Lightfoot play race cards in the great unraveling. The next headline, Republicans embraced the victimhood mythology. That's an interesting one. Merrick Garland stars in Biden's The Godfather Part 4. Another one, conventional wisdom about 2022 has been wrong, from Shapiro over at Roll Call. Our polls, and this was a good one. I'm not going to read it on air. I could be convinced. Our polls, once again, overestimating Democrats. They always do. It's funny, and here's a good illustration of that. I was looking, because I monitor, if you're listening to the show, I'm monitoring the Senate race. I'm not as worried about the House because Nancy Pelosi is going to be out of a job in November, and that's not me being optimistic. It's just the margins are too thin for her to retain control effectively of the House. That's going away. She knows it. Everyone knows it. Regardless of what Democrats want to tell you, they're going to lose the House. The Senate is interesting because the Senate they'd like to convince you that, the Senate cannot. Right now, the projection is the Republicans are going to pick up 2 seats. That being the case, the control for the Senate would fall into Republican hands. With 2 seats, it goes from 50-50 to 52-48, and Kamala Harris is irrelevant if Republicans stick together. That ends, and that would be one of the best things to happen because the Republicans won't be able to get anything done. The Democrats won't be able to get anything done. They'll kind of stymie things and set up for 2024. And America works very well when government stops doing more damage. And the biggest thing we need to do right now is not throw a monkey wrench in the economy, but stop the Democrats from throwing monkey wrenches in it. But as you know, if you're paying attention to this show, I've been monitoring the Fetterman race over in Pennsylvania. And I'm kind of, it's remarkable to me when I watch this, and I keep seeing that, in every poll that's out there from Susquehanna, Emerson, Franklin and Marshall, Trafalgar Group, all of the polls that have been done throughout August and through the end of August show Fetterman with a substantial lead from 4 points to about 13 points, depending on which poll you're looking at, which gives Fetterman, the Democrat, and there's not a single poll going back to June that shows Fetterman with anything but a lead. And yet, when you look at the projection on that one, it's a toss-up. Now, how can one candidate completely dominate all polling, and yet it be seen as a toss-up? And it's because of the history of Pennsylvania, and you have to wonder, because the reality of this race, there's just enough time. If Democrats could hold the race today, they wish they could, but they can't. And so the Fetterman race is very interesting because there's not a single poll that shows Mehmet Oz, the Republican, with anything. But RCP ranking has this as a toss-up. The Real Clear Politics projection is that the GOP will hold that seat. Now, you have to wonder, how in the world could every single poll, and when I say every, if I go back to June, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 polls that have been done since June, 8 significantly sized polls with a sampling size of anywhere from 522 folks to well over 1,000, almost 1,100. Polling sizes of that, polling that size, how could the Real Clear Politics people look at that and say it's going to be a GOP hold with not a single poll, which tells you that polls inexorably favor Democrats for whatever reason. In polling, Democrats, is what happened in 2020 with Donald Trump, or 2016 with Donald Trump. It's what happened in several places. It's what happened with Tom Tillis and Kay Hagan. It's what's happened in many Democrats, unless they have a substantial lead. And, well, I don't know, 2,000 mules. I can't believe I said that, but come on. It's something that it is worth debating. I think that needs to be debated at some point in time. But Democrats have got to be very, very concerned. And if you go one step further, let's take it one step further, and let's look at Georgia. And look at the Georgia race, which should be interesting. That's the Walker versus Warnock race. And I look at those polls. There's only one poll. This is fascinating. There's only one poll that shows Warnock with a lead, and it was done back in July. Back in July, Warnock, in the Fox News poll of all polls, had Warnock leading by 4. Walker, since then, Trafalgar Group, Emerson, Fox 5 Insider Advantage, these are polls from 550 to about 1,100 people polled, show Walker with an advantage. And the RCP projection at this point is still GOP pickup. So they're projecting that Walker wins. If Oz and Walker win, and then you've got to look at North Carolina, because North Carolina should honestly be, it should be an easy race. It's not. I don't know, why, but right now I want you to see this. The way things are trending for Beasley, even though she's done all of these ads, right now, so in the PPP poll, which is public policy, that's a left-leaning poll, they've got Beasley up by 1 as of the end of August. The next 2 polls that have done in September, which is showing since the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, Bud's picked up points. So Bud leads in the Trafalgar Group and the East Carolina University poll. They have Bud up by 3. And RCP projection on that one, GOP hold. So Democrats may be in much worse shape than they're trying to put out there. They know it's bad. They know it's a train wreck. They know it's a disaster. And I don't know. There's no economic good news for them on the horizon. There's nothing about the economy that's going to give them any wind in their sails. Abortion. And we'll talk about abortion later in the broadcast. So stay tuned. Much more to go. We've got Dr. Cahoon from the Riverwatch here in New Hanover County. Floodplain maps done. We'll be back after this here on the Chad Adams Show. Stay tuned.
Hello, I'm Matt Bennett with WWAY News. The Wilmington Police Department will soon put its history on display, and officers are trying to explain to critics why they're spending thousands of dollars on the project. A new museum would display historic artifacts in the halls of the headquarters. $40,000 of state drug tax revenue is funding the project. Some people are concerned whether that money could be better used for the community. City Attorney John Joy explains the proceeds must be used for law enforcement purposes and not for the general operations or activities of the city or county. Today marks the 4th anniversary of Hurricane Florence, and one building in downtown Wilmington damaged during the storm is still undergoing repairs. The Alton Lennon Federal Building and U.S. Courthouse on Water Street had significant flooding and electrical damage following Hurricane Florence in 2018. The building has been under construction for most of the last 4 years. Early estimates were that the building would be finished by summer of 2024, but a spokesperson for the city of Wilmington now says the repairs could be finished as early as spring of 2023. New Hanover County has completed its yearly progress report detailing efforts related to its floodplain. The county says the report demonstrates strategies to reduce floodplain hazards, as well as ensure homeowners can receive discounted flood insurance rates. Now that the report is finished, the county will submit it to the Insurance Services Office. And the Cape Fear has recently had some visitors in our waterways that you typically see in Florida. Over the past 10 years, manatee visits to the Cape Fear River have increased, with the most recent sighting happening last month. The manatees come from Florida, seeking cooler water and seagrass in the summer months. Tiffany Keenan is the Marine Mammal Stranding Program Coordinator at UNCW. She says if you do see a manatee, it's important to report it to them. For more on these stories, you can head on over to WWAYTV3.com. I'm Matt Bennett. Have a great day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm WWAY meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with your Storm Track the forecast. Comfortable conditions in store for us from start to finish. Lots of sunshine on the way, along with lower humidity and highs reaching the middle 80s inland of the coast, low to middle 80s along the immediate coastline. And we're going to stay dry and quiet throughout the next couple of days thanks to high pressure and full control of our weather pattern. As for tonight, cooler temperatures on the way, dropping down into the low 60s inland of the coast. Coastal areas falling down into the middle and upper 60s. Get your full forecast on WWAY and WWAYTV3.com.
This news and weather is brought to you by Two Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to twomenandatruck.com. twomenandatruck.com.
Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, located at 8210 River Road, Southport, is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, with the Tackle Box open Monday through Saturday, 7 to 6. Marine Service Pro is a full Suzuki and Tohatsu dealership. They deal in pre-owned boats, full service and repair with certified technicians in all engines and fiberglass specialists. The Tackle Box offers fresh local seafood, live bait, a tackle shop, and fish packing and shipping. They also offer a full-service U-Haul dealership. Spend time with Leon or Jenny for one-stop shopping at Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, 8210 River Road, Southport.
This week on All Things Brunswick, Dr. Terry Stoops from the John Locke Foundation will join us to discuss the recently released test scores from the state regarding student achievement and also to discuss the Brunswick scores in relation to statewide. Join us 6 p.m. Tuesdays here on The Big Talker.
Oh, wow. Okay. By the way, appreciate the comment. I want to get it right because you folks, if you're listening, you can be a part of the conversation. You can, whether almost every way, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you, TK, tell me, telephone. Hey, what's the telephone number if people want to call in? Because maybe we should give that out once in a while.
Yes, that would be 910-444-0281. It is also displayed on the screen right next to your forehead.
Right next to my, okay, I like that. It's kind of funny. Right next to my forehead. So if you're watching this, by the way, if you haven't, tell other people. You can listen to it. You can watch it on YouTube, on Facebook. I even Twitter. Is this on Twitter too? I think it's on Twitter too. You
Yes,
guys
sir.
are putting it everywhere. You guys, so it is out there. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell folks that they can tune in, be a part of what the heck we're doing here, and that their calls and conversation within reason. And I do appreciate Mr. Taylor reaching out to us, talking about in New Hanover County that we were talking about the local law enforcement issues. And it's so funny. I posted yesterday about Asheville PD, and someone on Twitter was like, you didn't discuss, the story doesn't discuss how, the police salaries and all that stuff. And I, it's so funny because they clearly didn't read the story that we posted. The story does talk about that the Asheville City Council has this whole defund the police movement was as alive and well in Asheville as anywhere. And so it has. The part of what's happened with the attrition of police in Asheville and other places is they did kind of throttle the police back a little bit. So that when now people retired, they didn't hire as many. They didn't hire as many people as retired. So they're losing, and it's making it less desirable to be a police officer. Now, this is yet again the foolhardy instant gratification of the political left is that they think they can do these movements because they sound really trendy and cool at the time. And I'm going to juxtapose that in a second with I hear TK rattling around. TK, are you having fun over there? So when the Democrats start crushing law enforcement and saying we're going to defund the police under the auspices of defending George Floyd, horrible death of George Floyd, but he is not a saint. He was a horrible human being. In many respects, when you point a gun in the stomach of a pregnant woman, and that's part of your CV, that's part of the things you've done in life, you've really but somehow you've become heroic. And I'll juxtapose that against all these lefties who hate the Queen and love George Floyd. I want you to let that sink in for a minute. You love George Floyd and you hate the Queen and what she's done for humanity versus what George Floyd. So a lot of people in Great Britain are like, yeah, thank you very much. For any of you criticizing our Queen, take a look at who you made a hero of in George Floyd. And they're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. But let's go, because I want to get to Chad Taylor's comment, and I appreciate him sharing it, is that the Democrats have throttled law enforcement, and there are a couple of consequences of that. One, when Democrats started doing it, my wife, the first thing she said as a former city manager was, you know what? You know what that's going to do? It's going to make hiring cops very expensive because all of a sudden, the fact that the Democrats have screamed about this defund the police, it's made police. It's going to be harder to hire police. It's going to be much more expensive. You're going to have to pay them a lot more to get them to go into a career that Democrats have demonized. You demonize the wrong team. Because of the actions of a couple of bad cops, you demonize the entire profession. Can you imagine that? If you did that, if the right did that and demonized one or two people and just castigated the entire profession. But they did that. The Democrats did it. And there are consequences. And you look at L.A. and San Francisco, you look at Chicago, you look at New York, you look at Wilmington, look at Asheville, look at, all of these places. It's gotten worse, not better. Crime's gotten worse, not better. And they're not even In many cities, they're not even enforcing stuff. And so to Chad Taylor's comment, and I appreciate him reaching out. Local bondsmen in New Hanover County, a lot of catch and release. Wilmington, it's happening in Wilmington. As they catch them, they just release them. 3 new magistrates in New Hanover County, and that's what's going on. Catch and release is taking place. So what you've done effectively when you have those kind of policies in place is that you've told the criminals, hey, if you commit these crimes, you're going to be right back on the street. Don't really fret about it. Don't get upset about it. You're probably going to get away with it. And when that word gets out, and it is in Wilmington, as Chad pointed out, not this Chad, but Chad Taylor, when that reality hits, the criminals just don't care because they know that the blue lights are not nearly as dangerous to a criminal's profession as it used to be. It's a much better time to be a criminal in American life. You just walk in, you steal. In certain parts of this country right now, if you steal, if you trespass, they're in Asheville. If you trespass, get on people's property, they're not going to enforce. Don't even call 911 about it. They're not going to dispatch an officer. Tough. Now, until people start shooting trespassers, and then it'll be national news, and it'll be all about guns. That's the way this whole process works. It's just unfathomable the degree to which we've gone down this path, and that law enforcement has become a shunned aspect of the political left. Border Patrol, shunned. Law enforcement, shunned. We want to give money to Ukraine because we didn't stand up to Russia enough. People are like, imagine if Trump was president now. Well, there is an argument to be made that Russia would not have invaded Ukraine. There is that argument. I mean, right now, the Germans are getting ready to face a brutally cold winter with the inability to heat people's homes because of what they've done. They've overly relied on green energy. They've shut down nuclear facilities, and now they're not going to be able to heat people's homes. I have family in Italy right now. They have to wait till the mayor gives them permission to turn on the heat. It's going to be cold until that time. Usually it's not till about, late October they're allowed to even turn on their heat. And they don't have AC. A lot of homes don't have AC over there. So when you have a heat wave, it's just tough. Try to dry your clothes on a clothesline because a lot of them don't have dryers either. People don't realize how much Europe has tried to make itself a third world continent by their actions. Imagine trying to dry your clothes in 85, 90% humidity. It would take days to do that. It's just, but alas, I digress because I want to get to the Lindsey Graham story. So the Lindsey Graham. So a lot of people are saying, hey, the only thing that helped Joe Biden yesterday was the fact that Lindsey Graham, South Carolina senator, who's trying to strike a tone, I guess, as a moderate. Lindsey Graham, who won't do Tucker Carlson. Lindsey Graham, who has many enemies in his own party, did something rather bizarre yesterday, at least in my opinion, bizarre. And I know what he was trying to do, but the way it was parlayed by the political left, they're like, oh my God, my team's falling apart. Lindsey Graham has given me something I can run with. Lindsey Graham, South Carolina senator, has introduced an abortion bill at the national level. So first of all, Republicans were making the argument, myself included, saying, hey, look, the overturning of Roe versus Wade didn't make abortion illegal. It remanded it to the states. The left never accepted that. They acted like abortion was made illegal instantly by the Supreme Court. It wasn't. It was remanded to the states. There's even been a lot of and this is typical, a lot of mischaracterization of laws. Even the Louisiana law, which initially I thought was too strict, but it absolutely allowed physicians to deal with the life of the mother. It allowed for rape, incest. It allowed for broken life. It allowed abortion for a number of issues. But it wasn't portrayed that way by the media. I mean, Dr. Phil did a whole show about, how it was mischaracterized, and he's not exactly a right-leaning wackadoo. So the left takes every opportunity to to radicalize. I mean, they are radicals, but they try to radicalize everything else in other states. And the truth of the matter is, states are going to settle. They will, over time, settle this. It'll probably be most states. What Democrats don't want to do, gosh, there's so much to unpack here. What Democrats don't want to do is define what abortion means to them. They want to say things like life. They want to say like it's a choice. They want to say they don't want consequences for the choice that got women pregnant. They don't want to define what a woman is. And so first of all, I would love for Democrats, when they start screaming about abortion, to define what a woman is. Instead of calling them, people who are capable of giving birth, they need to define what women are. because they say it's a woman's right issue. Even at the same time, the whole party itself can't define what a woman is. They just don't want to, because they really are all in on the transgender movement, and they don't want to talk about chromosomes and X, Y, and XX, and that being a defining characteristic of someone. It is. It's like being born with 9 fingers. If you're born with 9 fingers, you're born with 9 fingers. If you're born with 10, you're born with 10. It's not that. It's just silly XXXY stuff. They can't get it right. They can't get it in their heads that there are differences between the sexes. And they're substantial, they're significant, they're biological, and they have implications for health and welfare for the rest of those people's lives. But while Democrats are unable to answer what a woman is, they're at the same time pushing abortion. But they don't want to answer what that means. So it's a very difficult issue to navigate. It shouldn't be, but it is, because the pro-life side and the pro-choice side, they have more common ground than they think they do. Almost everyone on the pro-choice side would tell you, life of the mother, absolutely. Incest, rape, absolutely. Medical things, absolutely. There's a number of things you can do. The Europeans have settled it pretty much by saying 15 weeks. That's where we think the limit is, because after 15 weeks, if you have to do intrauterine surgery, you have to use anesthesia. Lindsey Graham used that example yesterday, that after 15 weeks, that child can feel pain. And so to do surgery, you have to use anesthesia. You can do surgery on someone who's entering the 4th month. And that's what that basically is, 15 weeks. It's going into the 2nd trimester. There's a person there. So Lindsey Graham introduces a bill at the national level that would ban abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. Now, there's all sorts of exceptions, life of the mother, all those things. Now, let's not forget that we have RU486. We have an abortion pill, the morning after pill. So for people who are victims of rape, they can take a pill. They can act. Those things aren't banned anywhere. So that's in place. That is a choice every woman can make. Woman. I mean that. Woman. We don't have any problem. If you're conservative, you don't have trouble knowing the difference between a man and a woman. Woman. Transgenders are not women. They're not. And that's a different issue. But 15 weeks of pregnancy. So Lindsey Graham's trying to basically put an abortion bill out there that strikes a tone to say abortion up to 15 weeks, almost 4 months, anybody could have one. Now, the minute he said that, the left lost their ever-loving minds. See, Republicans said they wanted to remand it to the states, and then Lindsey Graham and the Republicans want to introduce a bill to outlaw all abortions. So Cherry Beasley said that. If I went to Cherry Beasley's Twitter feed and I pulled it up right now, I'm going to try to, in fact, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to @CherryBeasley because that's where she is. By the way, if you want to find me on Twitter, it's Chad_Adams for the Chad Adams Show. You can do that. So I'm going to find Cherry Beasley here, and she's not hard to find. At least I'll make it hard to find because I can't spell her name right. So if we're fine, there we're Cherry Beasley. So here's Cherry Beasley. It's her. You can find her at Cherry Beasley NC, and she went nuts. This is the greatest thing. Senate Republicans just introduced a nationwide ban on abortion. Make no mistake, if Republicans take back the Senate, they will pass a nationwide ban, and my opponent Ted Budd will proudly vote for it. That's what's at stake. The extreme abortion ban will cost more than our freedoms. It will cost lives. Again, Cherry Beasley is just wrong. That's not what that is. That's actually allowing abortion up and until the 2nd trimester. So she just lied, and nobody called. The fact checkers didn't call her out. The media doesn't call her out. The media, in fact, is bought all into that this is a bill to ban all abortions. And it's actually, if you're a pro-life person, you're not going to agree with Lindsey Graham. He's going to have trouble getting votes for this in his own party. That's the irony of this. His own party is going to have trouble with this because it's allowing abortion pretty much on demand up and until the 2nd trimester. And then saying, hey, look, what he's trying to do is establish the line that medical doctors have said life really is. When pain is registered, they're saying right here, that's the line. So Lindsey's giving the pro-lifers stuff and he's giving the abortion people stuff. Now, this issue is setting gasoline. It's pouring gasoline on anything and setting it on fire. It's just making it. Now, if cooler heads do prevail, this presents a problem for both parties. And I'm not saying, look, I remanding it to the states to me is where ultimately I think we would find this would, in my opinion, this is where the common ground would be. I think that as the 50 states grapple with what abortion means to those states and as legislators or initiatives before voters comes out, I don't think anybody I take that back. I don't think anybody, and in fact, I put it to Cherry Beasley, and I would urge all of you, if you have discussion with Democrats, when they start going off on this, just ask them a simple question. Do you believe in abortion at birth? Do you believe that right at the moment right before that woman gives birth to that child, that abortion should be allowed? You should be able to reach in, crush the skull, pull the remains out, and have that pregnancy terminated at will. I asked Cherry Beasley this question. I ask every Democrat who tweeted out there to me, and anyway, okay, fine, you don't like Lindsey Graham's bill, fine. What is yours? Democrats will not tell you what that is. They will not. They don't want to address that issue. They just want to say it's a choice, it's a choice, it's a choice. But there are consequences to certain choices. Do you believe in abortion at demand up and until birth? That's the question the media will reluctantly ask. But that's where the beauty of what Lindsey Graham did, like him or not, I'm not the biggest fan. But the beauty of what he did was it will force Democrats to confront that issue. Because they want to castigate Graham as this is an extremist bill. There's nothing extreme about his bill. There's nothing extreme about it. You cannot like it. You can disagree with it. But a lot of pro-lifers are not going to like this because it's allowing abortion up until the second trimester. Now, if you can't make a decision, you'll know if there are genetic issues. You're going to know if it was rape, incest. You're going to know so much by the second trimester. And it's just silly. And Democrats want no consequences up and until the moment of birth. And look, I challenge them. If I'm wrong, then point out where I'm wrong. Prove it. Prove that what you're saying, prove that what you believe. If you really believe in choice, do you believe it up and until the moment of birth? Because they don't want to answer that. And the media won't ask them. Tell them, Governor Cooper, you've taken a stand on this. Cherry Beasley, you've taken a stand on this. All the Democrats out there are taking a stand. Tell us the truth. Because the stand that Democrats have taken is attacking Republicans. They haven't defined what it is they want. They haven't said, here's what we want. They liked Roe v. Wade. But in Roe v. Wade, really, in many respects, did throw it back to the states in some way because you had to decide, do you believe in this partial birth abortion where you reach in, you collapse the skull by sucking the brain out, crush the skull, and pull the fetus out at 9 months? Does Cherry Beasley believe that? Do Democrats believe that? Does Deb Butler believe that in Wilmington? Because I think if they would start asking Democrats, what they're going to discover is that Democrats like Cherry Beasley absolutely do support what Lindsey Graham's doing, probably more than the Republicans will. But right now, in the politically hot rhetoric season that's prior to an election, they want to convince you, the American public, that this is a ban on abortions. And it's not. They clearly didn't read the bill. They just jumped before they went. I think Democrats made a huge mistake in introducing legislation in Washington that would basically allow abortion up to the moment of birth, Graham told CNN. Now we have an alternative. The court's decision in June set off a nationwide scramble to define the legal rights to an abortion after it found nearly 50 years ago a constitutional right to it. And that was about right to privacy. And look, it needed to be refined more. In May, the Senate failed to advance a Democrat bill establishing a federal right to terminate a pregnancy until fetal viability or later if there's a risk to the pregnant patient's life or health. And by the way, if the Democrats had the vote, they could have passed it. They didn't. Fetal viability occurs around 22 to 24 weeks into a pregnancy. That's what CNN added in there. Meaning viable, you could remove it from the womb at 22 to 24 weeks, and you could, with a lot of assistance, get that pregnancy to survive, get that individual to survive. All Graham's doing is about 7 weeks before that because there's sensitivity to pain. Graham's bill, which has no chance of passing, provides exceptions for abortions required to protect the life of the mother and if the woman becomes pregnant through rape or incest. Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson, who is a tough re-election race, would not directly answer when asked if he backs Graham's bill. Johnson said abortion laws should be decided, we the people in 50 states. South Dakota Senator John Thune, GOP whip, defended the new legislation, saying it'll give GOP candidates a place to land when they get hammered by Democrats on the issue. But notice what you're not seeing too much. You don't see CNN asking Democrats about this bill. North Carolina Senator Tom Sillis said he wanted to focus on inflation and a potential strike by railroad workers. That's what we ought to be focusing on, Tillis said. And Wyoming Senator John Barrasko, third GOP member of leadership, said he supported Graham's previous anti-abortion proposals, but would not answer directly about this one. They don't go. I mean, you get on into it. Senate Democrat candidates immediately seized on the bill. And John Fetterman, who we've talked about earlier, who's running against Mehmet Oz, asked his opponent if he would support the legislation. Notice that Fetterman will not address how he feels about abortion. Republicans' national abortion bill will be on the ballot in every Senate race, said Michigan Senator Gary Peters, Democrat Senatorial Campaign Committee Chairman. The GOP has shown once again the threat they pose to a woman's right. By the way, Democrats can't define what a woman is, but get away with using it for political rhetoric. To a woman's right to make her own health care decisions, and voters will make their. Now, again, there's two questions Democrats don't like to answer when it comes to abortion. One is about what causes a pregnancy. That's for the most part, a willful act. Now, we've already made exceptions for rape and incest, so let's take those off the table, which means that every other case is consensual. So all of this consensual. So are Democrats saying that there should be no consequences to consensual sex? I mean, people can get STDs or STIs, as they like to call them nowadays. I mean, there are consequences. So it'd be like saying, well, you shouldn't have any consequences for having sex. There are consequences. There's emotional consequences, especially for folks who are not in a consensual relationship, who are just hooking up. There are consequences. And if you get knocked up, it shouldn't be, you've really diminished, oh man, I got knocked up, sucks. And then you just terminate, no big deal. That's really where the Democrats are on this. I don't know the answer to that. It's unclear if Republicans would put the Graham bill on the Senate floor. I don't know the answer to that, Boone told CNN. My expectation, as I said before, is that anything we put on the floor would be at 60 votes, and there aren't 60 votes for anything at the moment on either side. House Republicans also plan on introducing a 15-week abortion ban bill. House GOP leaders have not committed to putting the measure on the floor if they recapture the majority. But House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy had previously told CNN he supports banning abortions at 15 weeks. So again, CNN had the opportunity to go ask Democrats, okay, where do you believe abortion should be? Here? 3, I don't know, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, at 9 months? Democrats do not like answering specificity. And that's where, like, the Inflation Reduction Act was really about climate change, and it's not going to make a difference. It's not going to. It's just this foolish redistribution of wealth bill that isn't going to help inflation. It's not going to reduce inflation. It's going to add to the debt. I don't care what they say. It's a mess. Government is a worst place to solve problems. You couldn't find a worse place to solve problems. I don't know. Maybe you could. I don't know. I think criminal organizations are better at solving the problems within criminal organizations than the U.S. government is at solving problems in society. I don't think government by design was ever meant to solve societal problems. And what happens is you create a new government program, you put a lot of money behind it, you make it part of the culture, and then you can never take it away. Democrats from the 30s and 40s on absolutely knew this. I would say even earlier, when they're setting up public education in the early 1900s, late 1800s, they knew once they got that set up, it could never be undone. The path to charter schools and educational choice was fraught with peril, and it took 20 plus years to accomplish. And that's what it takes. It takes an inexorable amount of time to save Social Security and do the right things. The Democrats will never let you do that. They will never, because they will do to Social Security reform what they're doing here to abortion. They will do it to Medicaid and Medicare reform what they're doing to abortion. They will just demagogue it. They will speak in obtuse, weird language. They will not answer it because the media won't ask them. Will not ask them any difficult questions about saving these programs. They let the Democrats make sweeping generalities about, we need to make sure that Social Security lasts forever. Well, how are you going to do that? We're going to tax the rich. No, well, actually, Social Security is funded by the people who are in the workforce. Well, that's not a problem. We're just going to make sure we keep it solvent. We're going to kick the can down the road. Will you let us privatize some of it so the returns will be higher? No, we can't do that because then you'll be rewarding the rich. So these are the kind of things that the Democrats want to do, and they will never. They will never, ever, ever, ever allow a legitimate conversation about that. Now, do Republicans do that? Yeah. Republicans typically react to Democrats by doing the same exact thing. They sweeping generalities, and they attack any given perceived weakness. So you almost can't have salient conversations. But the problem is that Democrats just want to grow government. And when you're fighting growth in government, it's really, difficult to do that because you have to take away something that you've given. The tax code should be an easy one. The tax code, if ever there was an opportunity to get rid of the impact that special interest has had on the U.S. government, it would be via the U.S. tax code. And it is, look, I have very complicated taxes. It takes me weeks to do them. And it is astounding the carve-outs that different aspects of the U.S. tax code get into and the specificity that things get into with the U.S. tax code. And yet, you could simplify that. There's no reason the U.S. tax code shouldn't be about 20 pages or less total. There should be very simple tax code. And that's a winner for Democrats and Republicans, but the Democrats will never, ever, 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 ever allow that to happen. Now, we are very blessed and fortunate to have folks that want to come in and talk about issues that are germane to our communities, especially the Southeast, where we are headquartered, but we discuss, obviously, statewide and national issues as well. And we're going to have Dr. Larry Cahoon, TK will correct me on that, Dr. Cahoon, that will be talking about that. The floodplain maps have just gotten completed. The last ones, I think, in Brunswick County were 2018. It looks like they're updating them. And so that will be germane to anyone who wants to build a house in New Hanover County for the next 4 years. That will determine what their insurance rates will be, what kind of windows they have to have in their house, and they can be very expensive. Much more to go with the Cape Fear Riverwatch here next on the Chad Adams Show. Do stay tuned. Hour 2 getting ready to be underway.
You're tuned in to the Big Talker Network, Wilmington, North Carolina's premier internet station for news and talk radio programming. Find us online at bigtalker.live.
This week on All Things Brunswick, Dr. Terry Stoops from the John Locke Foundation will join us to discuss the recently released test scores from the state regarding student achievement and also to discuss the Brunswick scores in relation to statewide. Join us 6 p.m. Tuesdays here on the Big Talker.
One Love Tennis started in 2013 to give back to young boys and girls. We now go through 460 kids a week that are learning about life skills, learning to succeed in life through academics and tennis. Putting those two together, if you do them well, you can write your own ticket. To get involved in this program, go to our website, one-love-tennis.org.
Enjoying Big Talker Network is as easy as asking for it. Program your digital home assistants such as Google Home, Alexa, and Siri to stream Big Talker Network content by simple voice command. Enjoy convenient hands-free access to program whenever you want, however you want by asking for Big Talker.
Hello, I'm Matt Bennett with WWAY News. The Wilmington Police Department will soon put its history on display, and officers are trying to explain to critics why they're spending thousands of dollars on the project. A new museum would display historic artifacts in the halls of the headquarters. $40,000 of state drug tax revenue is funding the project. Some people are concerned whether that money could be better used for the community. City Attorney John Joy explains the proceeds must be used for law enforcement purposes and not for the general operations or activities of the city or county. Today marks the 4th anniversary of Hurricane Florence, and one building in downtown Wilmington damaged during the storm is still undergoing repairs. The Alton Lennon Federal Building and U.S. Courthouse on Water Street had significant flooding and electrical damage following Hurricane Florence in 2018. The building has been under construction for most of the last 4 years. Early estimates were that the building would be finished by summer of 2024, but a spokesperson for the city of Wilmington now says the repairs could be finished as early as spring of 2023. New Hanover County has completed its yearly progress report detailing efforts related to its floodplain. The county says the report demonstrates strategies to reduce floodplain hazards, as well as ensure homeowners can receive discounted flood insurance rates. Now that the report is finished, the county will submit it to the Insurance Services Office. And the Cape Fear has recently had some visitors in our waterways that you typically see in Florida. Over the past 10 years, manatee visits to the Cape Fear River have increased, with the most recent sighting happening last month. The manatees come from Florida, seeking cooler water and seagrass in the summer months. Tiffany Keenan is the Marine Mammal Stranding Program Coordinator at UNCW. She says if you do see a manatee, it's important to report it to them. For more on these stories, you can head on over to WWAYTV3.com. I'm Matt Bennett. Have a great day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm WWAY meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with your Storm Track the forecast. Comfortable conditions in store for us from start to finish. Lots of sunshine on the way, along with lower humidity and highs reaching the middle 80s inland of the coast, low to middle 80s along the immediate coastline. And we're going to stay dry and quiet throughout the next couple of days thanks to high pressure and full control of our weather pattern. As for tonight, cooler temperatures on the way, dropping down into the low 60s inland of the coast. Coastal areas falling down into the middle and upper 60s. Get your full forecast on WWAY and WWAYTV3.com.
This news and weather is brought to you by Two Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to twomenandatruck.com. twomenandatruck.com.
Join Big Talker Network is as easy as asking for it. Program your digital home assistants such as Google Home, Alexa, and Siri to stream Big Talker Network content by simple voice command. Enjoy convenient hands-free access to the program whenever you want, however you want by asking for Big Talker.
Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, located at 8210 River Road, Southport, is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, with the Tackle Box open Monday through Saturday, 7 to 6. Marine Service Pro is a full Suzuki and Tohatsu dealership. They deal in pre-owned boats, full service and repair, with certified technicians in all engines, and fiberglass specialists. The Tackle Box offers fresh, local seafood, live bait, a tackle shop, and fish packing and shipping. They also offer a full-service U-Haul dealership. Spend time with Leon or Jenny for one-stop shopping at Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, 8210 River Road, Southport.
Please stand by.
We now take you live to the Institute of Rational Thought for a special broadcast. Hard-hitting interviews and relevant information to make your day. It's Chad Adams.
And good morning, folks. Glad to have you with us here on the broadcast. Chad Adams, your host, at least for the next hour or so. And TK doing a great job making it all sound like, I'm somewhere I'm not, which I'm down here at the beautiful mouth of the Cape Fear River, Brunswick County, Coast Guard Station defending us on one side, Lighthouse, and Old Baldy on the other side. And with us right now, Dr. Larry Cahoon, joining us this morning for the Cape Fear Riverwatch, the people who look at all this stuff. And there's been a huge development. Every couple of years, the state has to update its floodplain maps, especially along the coast and adjacent to rivers and streams and stuff, because it affects the builders. It affects, you want to build a home somewhere, you have to know. So what are the relative risks? And that's one of the groups that are not key, but the floodplains. So Dr. Cahoon, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing just fine. Good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about this. I think that at least Brunswick counties, when I went through a bunch of permitting, 2018 were the most recent. I think they're updated either every 4 or 8 years. Can you tell us a little bit about the development of the floodplain maps?
The whole point of designating floodplains is to get a handle on the risk of flooding. And that's a special circumstance when it comes to insurance. And that's how we manage the risk. We don't allow you to develop, obviously, in wetlands unless there's mitigation and that sort of thing. And that's partly about saving the wetlands, but that's also partly about flood risk. And, of course, here on the coast, we're very mindful of flood risk. Storm surge, rivers flooding, and as we've learned over the years with hurricanes like Floyd and Matthew and Florence, inland flooding from heavy, heavy rains can be a very serious risk for folks who are miles and miles away from the coast, and for that matter, even a long way away from the rivers. And our response to that has been to try and get a better handle on what the real risks are of flooding. Flooding and fires are the two really nasty hazards that pose major threats to life, of course, but they also damage structures and property. And where the economic rub comes is with insurance or lack thereof. What we've learned in the past from the big flood events like Matthew and Florence and so on was that a lot of folks who didn't know they were in a floodplain because it wasn't designated, they weren't they weren't told they were in a floodplain because according to the formal rules they were not, and yet they got flooded. And as a consequence, many of them did not have flood insurance because they weren't required to. And so their losses were huge and largely uncompensated, at least by insurance. Some of it was disaster relief funding and that sort of thing, but that's a backdoor way of dealing with that problem. Redoing the flood maps allows us to update what we've learned about flooding events from the past, and also to reflect factors like sea level rise and expected coastal flooding from that. This region has seen remarkable levels of sunny day flooding from very high tides, and so we have to take that into account. Wilmington proper, as I think I've mentioned on this show in the past, has seen about an 8-inch rise in sea level at high tide in the last 12 years. So all of those factors, the possibility of heavier rains and the fact that certain areas have flooded that weren't previously designated as being in a flood zone, leads to the need to update those flood risk maps. And what those maps do is tell us which properties are at some risk of being flooded, and I think it's 1 in 100 years is the benchmark, meaning that the likelihood of being flooded in any 1 year is 1%. And that feeds then into how insurance comes into play. Now, insurance with flooding is one of those real interesting subjects. Flooding is so damaging. The loss that you suffer when you have a flood in your house is so damaging that, the costs of being flooded are very high. The risk may be very low, but the cost, once it happens, is very high. One of the consequences with flooding, of course, is therefore that you're going to have very big expenses, but also it's very hard to predict the risk. Given these floodplain maps and all of that, it's very tough to predict the risk. The private insurance industry has largely gone away from insuring flooding risk, partly because the assessment of risk is difficult, and the cost when it happens is very high.
Well, but let me stop.
Yeah.
Let me, because a couple things I want to get to, because I want you to keep going, but there's also things I want to go back to. John Stossel has a famous piece where he discusses, because you're getting into insurance, sea level rise, subsistence. You're getting into, there's a reason they call it Water Street in Wilmington. It historically has been subject to that. Dredging is also impacting downtown Wilmington when you're digging, trenching. Right. That affects. There's a lot of different things that are at work here.
Right.
And Stossel bought a waterfront home up in Northeast North Carolina, and ultimately, didn't get it insured. It got partially destroyed and then ultimately destroyed. He was able to get it completely covered by federal insurance, meaning the federal, so it's very confusing to people that are out there trying to protect their homes in the free market while the government's providing protection. And there's a distortion there that's taken place. And so it's like, why should I get my home insured when the federal government's giving all these other people who didn't insure their homes? That's confusing. Secondly, I live down here. We have several homes down here. And, what it's funny, the building, because you're insuring on building cost. And when building costs go from $100 to $320 a square foot, the insurance, regardless of, it should be on the insurance companies to determine relative risk, but they're relying on the government to tell the insurance companies what the relative risk is, which seems a little strange. There's
a lot wrapped up in that. The federal flood insurance program actually began back in the 1920s as a result of a massive flood in the Mississippi River Valley, which damaged not only private properties, but a whole lot of, residential, but a whole lot of commercial and even government facilities, ports, docks, wharves, that sort of thing. Did a tremendous amount of damage. And it was understood that it was going to be very difficult for private insurers to cover that. And so the Fed stepped in and created the federal flood insurance program, which is basically a subsidy program. The premiums they charge are only a portion of what the real risk assessments would indicate should be charged.
Because it's not a free market. It's not a free market approach. It's a government approach.
No, it's not. No, it's a government. It's a subsidy.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And in some cases, I think your friend who was flooded out up in the northeast part of the state, that may be separate from the formal federal flood insurance program. That may be disaster relief or something else like that, where the compensation is offered after the loss, not that you were insured for it. But if you're going to build in a flood zone, you're required, if you're self-funding, you don't have to pay for the insurance. You're self-funding, right? So if you're really rich and don't borrow money from a bank to build, it's on you. But if you're going to borrow money from a bank, you have to have flood insurance. That's the standard requirement.
Well, even if you don't, though, you start to insure your house. If I just wanted to insure my house for, $250,000 and the cost to replace it is $6,000, then I get tacked with another 15% increase.
Yeah.
So what they say is, we're only going to insure it. You wanted this, but we're going to tack on. It needs to be insured at $385 instead of $250. Even if you're not borrowing money.
In the case of a mortgage, the bank wants to be sure that they get their money back.
Right.
No matter what.
But I don't have any loans. I've gone through this with my parents passing. I had to go through insurance. My insurance increased 80% across the board when they died, and we went to because they reassessed all the property, and it was obscene. Yep. And it's not. It wasn't based on sea level rise. It was based on replacement cost. And
now, are we talking about homeowners or flood insurance?
Flood insurance.
Okay.
So I'm down here on Oak Island, and the cost of replacement down here has gone up so much they had to raise it from $250 to $320 a square foot.
That's right.
And all homes are not built the same.
Right. Now, there was an effort made by the Congress, the Biggs Waters Act back in 2012 or 2013, where they decided that the federal subsidy was costing the feds too much. Matter of fact, the federal flood insurance program at that point was in the red by tens of billions of dollars. They had paid out far more money than they had allocated for it. And so the Biggs Waters Act stipulated that federal flood insurance rates were going to go up to reflect actual market costs. In other words, the subsidy was going to go away. And that, of course, got a lot of pushback, and I don't think they ever actually implemented the full increase in costs. There's a relevant story here. Back in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan's Secretary of the Interior, James Watt, decided that federal flood insurance could only be offered to communities that were incorporated as of 1982, and that any additional flood-prone communities that incorporated after that would not be eligible to participate in the federal flood insurance program. Well, the town of North Topsail was incorporated after that deadline, and they have not qualified, therefore, for federal flood insurance coverage. Now, if you want to buy or build a house up there, you have to get private flood insurance. And if you look at real estate prices, North Topsail, the sale prices on the condos and homes appear to be quite reasonable, meaning low. And then you find out what the private flood insurance premiums are going to be, and it's on a par with your mortgage payment. In other words, you're really paying double what you thought you were to go live there or to own property there. So that is an indicator of the difference between the real cost of insuring as determined by the private insurance markets as opposed to what the feds are letting you do and subsidizing. So it's expensive. I know when I live here in Wilmington on the upper reaches of Bradley Creek, and we went to refinance at one point, and the new flood maps had nicked a corner of the house. And frankly, I think it's a bunch of crap, but they told us we were going to have to get flood insurance if we were going to refinance. And it wasn't going to be hugely expensive, but I thought that's a ripoff. I mean, they literally nicked the corner of the house. Yeah, and so we chose not to refinance, and I've since paid off the mortgage, and I don't have flood insurance. I'm not worried about the water coming up into my basement. Well, it's not a basement, but
even here at the coast, I mean, here at the beaches, it's not the water can rise, but if you have a concrete house, okay, you're going to have you're going to have damage, but it's probably cheaper to replace. And if you're on stilts, it's not, it may damage your car if you can't get it off the island or something. Yeah, and it's more wind and things that the wind blows. There's so many different ways that you can have destruction. I mean, they force you. I was not, for instance, allowed by code to put my to have any kind of livable space on my first floor in this house that I'm building.
And that dates back to Hurricane Hazel. That's a statewide
Well, no, you could have
rule.
no concrete structures. There are plenty of first floors on this island. There's plenty of concrete ranch-style homes.
A dwelling space at ground level there, and that code dates back to Hurricane Hazel. Back when Hazel hit, the dwelling spaces were at ground level, and the 17-foot storm surge that came through killed people and, of course, destroyed their homes. And so now we require that the houses be elevated, and that you can't have dwelling space. You can have utility space down there, and of course, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. People break that rule
all the time.
All the time. And of course, we also require mandatory evacuations of towns when we think there's a Cat 1 coming. Anything more than that, the whole point is to minimize the risk of life first, then to minimize the amount of damage. Bear in mind that all those ground level structures in a storm surge are going to get blown out and trashed and laid all over everyone else's property and out in the streets and out in the sounds. So it's an effort to minimize the cost and the time commitment to clean all that mess up. People do dumb stuff, but we're trying to minimize how much of that happens. Again, you're kind of socializing the costs there. Some things you can't prevent, like the beach washing into the streets. I remember after Hurricane Fran, there were 3 feet of sand in the streets in Wrightsville Beach. And that's just, the beach being blown over by the wave.
Happens every time. Even Isaias here at Oak Island, past 40th Street. Yeah. That was the water coming in.
Yeah, that's going to happen. Yeah, I mean, Oak Island
that's nature.
Blasted. When was it?
Isaias just 2 years ago.
Yeah,
2 years ago.
That's right.
But it was only one end of the island. The other end of the island, you would have known there was a storm.
Small storm. Yeah, and the eye went over the island so that the backside of the storm went over a portion of the island, didn't do as much damage. And the right quadrant is where that big storm surge happened. It was not huge, but it was enough.
It was pretty bad.
Yeah. It was enough,
and it was barely, and it was
right.
barely a Category 1. But again, storms.
Right.
You could have a Category 2 or 3 that sweeps through very quickly and does some damage, but doesn't do as much. And you can have a storm that sits on you and soaks you for 3 days, or a minimal Category 1 that shocked a lot of people because this island has survived so many. So that was a little bit of a shock. It's just when and what and how long. Those are the big questions.
Right. That's right. Duration. Wind speed matters in terms of the height of the storm surge. But again, the buildup, the time that the storm has to push the ocean in front of it. When Hurricane Sandy hit up north, it was still only a Cat 1, but it had a long fetch, that is the distance over water that the wind blew, and it came in slowly enough to push that ocean right into those places. It takes a while to push that much ocean that far up, and it had the time. So, each storm is unique that way. With Florence, we didn't get much of a storm surge, but we sure got a hell of a lot of rain. And we'd had plenty of rain before that, so the ground was soaked. And the consequence of the flooding damage was extraordinary. Of course, 40 inches of rain will do an awful lot. And again, an awful lot of folks inland, got flooded when they didn't expect to. One of the problems inland, and I hope that the new flood maps for counties like Pender and Brunswick and Bladen reflect this, is that number one, there's a lot of low-lying areas a long way from the coast. They're only 20 feet up or so from sea level, which is really not very much. But we've also built roads, and road beds are raised up over the surrounding landscape, and they function like dams. Well, we call them road dams, actually. And quite often you'll have culverts and little bridges where you've got creeks. But if you have enough rain, like Florence or Matthew, 30, 40 inches of rain, you basically are creating massive reservoirs of water inland. 10, 12 feet of water over the ground level, and it can't get downstream fast enough to avoid that because the roads themselves block the flow of that water. Right. You've probably seen videos of water running across roadways, and they warn you, if it's more than 6 or 8 inches deep, don't even think about it.
Oh, it's what happened in Boiling Springs. It just ran across that.
Oh, yeah.
Earth
well, their lakes
that's a vivid example
and destroyed their dams. Yeah,
and it's still not been repaired. Up. Years later, it's they're looking for a certain type of clay.
Expensive. And expensive partly because they know now that they're going to have to redesign them. It's going to take serious engineering to create a set of dams that will withstand that worst possible flooding event. Just rebuilding what they had before clearly doesn't work.
That's funny you mentioned this. I have property in Lee County also, and there's through the past 100 years, North Carolina has built more ponds, dams than you could shake a stick at, thousands upon thousands of them. The Corps of Engineers was very busy, and some of those, depending on the size of them, are covered under the Federal Dam Act. And I have one of those ponds. It's about an 8-acre pond. It's got a 26-foot deep, blocks up a channel there. And anything we do, from vegetation to piping, has to be approved by the federal government for me to do anything. And those are all for irrigation purposes. But the water supply aspects of pond building in North Carolina are remarkable. But again, dams are a big thing, and from an engineering standpoint, they can be very costly.
And I know that surveys have been done, at least partial ones, of hopefully a representative set of dams, some of which are privately built, and they found that some portion, of course, don't meet the engineering standards to be able to withstand a particular flooding event. And the risk, of course, with dams is dam failure. When one of those things lets go, all of a sudden you've got a massive surge of water going downstream, and in some cases, it goes off into a swamp or whatever, and okay, that's why we let swamps stay there. They attenuate that, but in some cases, the folks downstream are in big trouble. And in the case of Boiling Spring Lakes, I'm pretty sure that when those dams failed, there was really nobody downstream to be swept away. And so, it was a catastrophe in the sense that the lake was destroyed, but it didn't kill anyone in the process. There are dams, of course, throughout North Carolina where there is some risk to public safety. And
especially
that may
in the mountains,
especially
in the mountain areas, because here water rises. Up there, it funnels and it moves much.
And
people don't.
You get
all
that flow. Moving water has tremendous force. People often don't credit the power of moving water. And this is why we've seen people drown themselves trying to drive through some of these flooded roads. That's a really scary proposition. It doesn't take much water to float your average vehicle off the road and into much deeper water and flip it over while you're in it. That's a really scary proposition. The public authorities are very good about saying, don't do that. Don't drive into floodwater, period. And you see water rescues happening all the time on TV from these flooded cities and towns. It's terrifying. I've done a little bit of whitewater canoeing and that sort of thing, and oh my, you don't want to try to fight the current. Your only hope is to go with it. And so it's a really serious business. The other aspect about flooding here that I want to bring up, I was thinking about this morning on the way in, and our flooding here in New Hanover County is typically ponding, right? And it's not moving anywhere. That's why it's flooding. It just kind of builds up and sits there and slowly drains away. So the risk of being swept away is pretty small. I still wouldn't let the kids play in it because some of that water, goes down storm drains, and you don't want to get stuck in one of those. But the other risk is that water is dirty.
I tell you what, Dr. Cahoon, we need to take a break right now, I realize, but I want to keep you on. Can you stay on for a little while longer?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a break here. Sure. Chad Adams Show. We'll be right back with Dr. Cahoon in a moment. Stay tuned.
Right.
Hello, I'm Matt Bennett with WWAY News. The Wilmington Police Department will soon put its history on display, and officers are trying to explain to critics why they're spending thousands of dollars on the project. A new museum would display historic artifacts in the halls of the headquarters. $40,000 of state drug tax revenue is funding the project. Some people are concerned whether that money could be better used for the community. City Attorney John Joy explains the proceeds must be used for law enforcement purposes and not for the general operations or activities of the city or county. Today marks the 4th anniversary of Hurricane Florence, and one building in downtown Wilmington damaged during the storm is still undergoing repairs. The Alton Lennon Federal Building and U.S. Courthouse on Water Street had significant flooding and electrical damage following Hurricane Florence in 2018. The building has been under construction for most of the last 4 years. Early estimates were that the building would be finished by summer of 2024, but a spokesperson for the city of Wilmington now says the repairs could be finished as early as spring of 2023. New Hanover County has completed its yearly progress report detailing efforts related to its floodplain. The county says the report demonstrates strategies to reduce floodplain hazards, as well as ensure homeowners can receive discounted flood insurance rates. Now that the report is finished, the county will submit it to the Insurance Services Office. And the Cape Fear has recently had some visitors in our waterways that you typically see in Florida. Over the past 10 years, manatee visits to the Cape Fear River have increased, with the most recent sighting happening last month. The manatees come from Florida, seeking cooler water and seagrass in the summer months. Tiffany Keenan is the Marine Mammal Stranding Program Coordinator at UNCW. She says if you do see a manatee, it's important to report it to them. For more on these stories, you can head on over to wwaytv3.com. I'm Matt Bennett. Have a great day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm WWAY meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with your Storm Track 3 forecast. Comfortable conditions in store for us from start to finish. Lots of sunshine on the way, along with lower humidity and highs reaching the middle 80s inland of the coast, low to middle 80s along the immediate coastline. And we're going to stay dry and quiet throughout the next couple of days thanks to high pressure and full control of our weather pattern. As for tonight, cooler temperatures on the way, dropping down into the low 60s inland of the coast. Coastal areas falling down into the middle and upper 60s. Get your full forecast on WWAY and WWAYTV3.com.
This news and weather is brought to you by Two Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to twomenandatruck.com. twomenandatruck.com.
Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, located at 8210 River Road, Southport, is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, with the Tackle Box open Monday through Saturday, 7 to 6. Marine Service Pro is a full Suzuki and Tohatsu dealership. They deal in pre-owned boats, full service and repair, with certified technicians in all engines, and fiberglass specialists. The Tackle Box offers fresh, local seafood, live bait, a tackle shop, and fish packing and shipping. They also offer a full-service U-Haul dealership. Spend time with Leon or Jenny for one-stop shopping at Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, 8210 River Road, Southport.
This week on All Things Brunswick, Dr. Terry Stoops from the John Locke Foundation will join us to discuss the recently released test scores from the state regarding student achievement and also to discuss the Brunswick scores in relation to statewide. Join us 6 p.m. Tuesdays here on The Big Talker.
Welcome back to the Chad Adams Show. Our guest, Dr. Larry Cahoon, he of the Cape Fear Riverwatch, who has been closely monitoring the development of the flood maps and floodplain, which determines so much of what it costs to own a home in this market and elsewhere. We've been talking about, sea level rise, subsistence a little bit, just touched on that. But more importantly, the impact that flooding has on people's homes, not just here, but across the state. Flooding very different in the western part of the state than down east. It rises down here, it flows out there. And when it comes barreling down one of those valleys, it wipes out, entire groups of homes in that area. And so, how do you look at floodplain development in the mountains? Because it's just a very different reality.
Yeah, the mountains are scary. I went to college at Washington and Lee University in Lexington, Virginia, and the summer before I matriculated there, we had Hurricane Agnes come through the mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, and Agnes was not a very strong storm, but it created a tremendous amount of rainfall. And in the mountains, you don't need, 3-4 feet of rain to get into serious trouble. They had about a foot of rain, and it caused severe flooding in those mountain rivers. And it's especially scary because the valleys are shaped like a V. And so when they fill up with water, they fill up really fast, and the water's moving very fast. And, you often have matter of minutes to get out once a flood like that begins. And, of course, a lot of these floods happen at night. I'm not sure why, but an awful lot of this tragic stuff happens at night when it's dark. The lights go out, you can't see what's happening, and then you start to hear that roar. And, they had hundreds of people drowned, and many of them never recovered in those mountain areas. So I remember, my bell was rung pretty well by that, that knowledge. Down here in the coastal plain where it's flat, you often don't get the fast-moving water, and you can see it rise, but it's not, It's not going to sweep you away. It's just going to submerge everything, and you can find yourself trapped. And in some cases, as we've learned, unfortunately, by the time you know you're in trouble, you can't get out. You're stuck at your house up on the roof or something like that. So part of the problem has been we've not anticipated what would happen inland in terms of flooding from those big rain events. So a lot of folks inland were surprised. When you ask people out at the beaches, did Hurricane Floyd cause you any trouble? No, not much. What about Matthew? What about Florence? Well, not much. A little wind. The ocean came up a bit, but not a whole lot of damage on the coast. It's inland where the casualties happened. It's inland where the big property damage took place, the severe flooding.
Takes one tornado to mess up your day inland. One tornado, 3 inches of rain. I mean,
right. Been through one of those. Thank you very much. I'll take a hurricane any day. You can see them coming.
Yeah.
And if you pay attention and you're aware of your risks, you can take appropriate action. With a tornado, it's just take cover. That's the only option you've got. Take cover and hope for the best. And hopefully it's over quickly. But the amount of damage done in a matter of minutes is stunning. And not surprisingly, we've seen I can remember some number of tornado events in this area that killed people, and some of those were not well forecast. The one that hit down in Sunset Beach 3 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah. They did not see that coming. And when I say they, I mean the weather people themselves. It was a very unusual weather feature, but they didn't understand that it could have caused a tornado until it was too late. And 3 people were killed down there. It was at night, and, I would assume they had virtually no warning, no way to take effective cover. Weather.
It was a freak storm, and that's one of the.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, weather is very difficult to predict. We want to pretend in 2022 that we have all the answers. We have difficulty prognosticating almost anything. We have difficulty understanding complexities. It's easy to say we're going to have 20 named storms, and then you have 5. But it's very difficult. And the people who predict these hurricanes, at least they have some degree of humility. Sometimes they predict less and they have more. It's not easy. Weather prognostication, especially in this area, is very difficult because of where the rain-snow line could be. And move that line 5 miles, and it's a difference between 12 inches of snow and 1 inch of rain.
That's right. That's right.
And even sea level stuff, with subsistence and some other things, sea level's difficult, and that's why it makes it bandied about in the media.
There have been quite a few surprises. I looked at sea level using data from the Wilmington tide gauge. It's an official NOAA tide gauge right near Memorial Bridge on the West Bank. And I looked at the monthly high tides over a span of 12 years, from 2010 to 2022. And the monthly high tides, the average high tides, had gone up by 8 inches in 12 years. And I was shocked. Yep. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute, that can't be right. The data were there. That was clear. You could see it. There was no question about that. And then I thought, well, maybe that tide gauge is subsiding. Now, NOAA's pretty good about making sure that doesn't happen. But I checked the tide gauges for Myrtle Beach and Beaufort, and they were both showing a pretty substantial sea level rise, too. The Wilmington tide gauge was showing the highest, about 8 inches in 12 years. But they were showing 4 to 6, if I recall. And the effect ran all the way from Cape Hatteras down to Florida. And I thought, gee, that's amazing. No one that I knew of had forecast that. I went into the literature and sure enough found a paper written by the oceanography folks out of Florida. I forget which university, Florida Atlantic or one of those, and they found that the Gulf Stream itself had been warming. Well, okay, but warm water is less dense and rides higher than cool water. And sure enough, the warming of the Gulf Stream accounted for this rise in sea level regionally. We did not see that coming. Right. I mean, I'm here to tell you, I've been looking at that. I'm an oceanographer. I've been looking at that stuff for many years. And I was shocked at how rapid a rate of rise that was. And it's about a 1 degree
where the Gulf Stream
increase.
And where it pushes water. Where the Gulf Stream pushes
water. The Gulf Stream rides higher, and that water, gravity wants that water to come back down. The Gulf Stream is kind of like a little ridge out there. Topographically, you can't see it from a boat.
Right.
You can see it from satellite altimetry, but
and the closer it moves to shore, if the Gulf Stream moves closer, it pushes more water. If it moves further, you would have.
And so it's constrained by the shelf break. The bottom of the continental shelf keeps the Gulf Stream from getting too close. It does meander, and of course, sea level during the winter, when it's colder in general, also tends to go down.
Right.
The bad news is that sea level is highest right about now, the heart of hurricane season.
Right. And at the same time, we're seeing record number of turtle nests being laid everywhere. I mean, we're seeing that the turtles have done quite well. The nests are there.
It's been a very good year for the turtles, although I understand the coyotes out on Masonboro have torn up their nests. But it's been a good year for turtles. Interesting you brought that up. There's a temperature effect on sea turtle sex determination.
There is. Absolutely.
The sex of a baby sea turtle is actually determined by temperature.
The temperature of the sand in which the eggs are sitting.
The incubation temperature. And if you raise that temperature by a degree or 2 centigrade, you get more female turtles and fewer males. And so the sex ratio becomes increasingly biased towards female turtles. And the problem when you have a sex ratio that's really skewed like that is that there aren't enough males to go around. And I'm going to resist the urge to make light of that, but the risk to the population is that your breeding females may be unable to find a mate, and the population may not be able to reproduce as successfully as they would if the sex ratio were more balanced. So we're watching that phenomenon.
Indeed. My father worked with the program for about 20 years. And when you watch this over time, one thing, male turtles could deal with a number of females. It's not just they don't mate for life. The males never come back ashore.
Right.
The females will lay multiple clutches. They could have 7, 8 clutches a year. And so, and also these turtles live phenomenally long periods of time through cold, through cooler summers and warmer summers. So you've got an aggregation that takes place over time in which natural selection does make a difference. You can actually have more sharks or fewer sharks, fewer things eating turtles or more things. There's so many aspects to this.
There's a lot of factors in there.
Yeah. And the turtles, the good news is they're doing well. This is the good news is that turtles are doing well.
Partly that's that we've been, making an effort to protect them. As you mentioned, they're very long-lived. And so when you reduce the mortality on sea turtles, from all causes, the population, will tend to stabilize and grow.
Now, here's one good thing I do want to add to the sea turtle discussion, since you mentioned it, is that in Oak Island, now they're doing DNA testing on the eggs. So they've got a running database of a number of things. And what they discovered was this year here on Oak Island, and it's probably happened elsewhere. These turtles live, they can live well over 100 years. We had a turtle, and it takes 30 years for a female to be able to come back and lay eggs. So once they go out to sea, it's 30 years before they come ashore again. We had a grandmother and a daughter and a granddaughter that all laid. So you had 3 females generationally apart. So that's a 90-year-old mom giving birth. I mean, laying eggs. That's amazing if you think about that.
Excellent.
And that's the kind of thing you see happen. And they all come back to the same beach.
Right. Oh yeah. They're very birthplace loyal, and they've got navigation senses that allow them to do that. We think they use the magnetic field of the Earth actually as an assist in their navigation.
But we don't know.
Able to,
they go 600 miles off. They're going out to the Sargasso Sea. I mean, they have to go out. There's little fellas navigating the Gulf Stream to get across the Gulf Stream, and then out there, and they stay in that Sargassum for decades.
I have colleagues, Chapel Hill, who've actually worked on the magnetic sense and sea turtles and other animals, and they actually have kind of an internal compass. They can sense the magnetic field. Yeah, it's incredible.
And they eat them down in Grand Cayman. So.
Oh yeah, well they farm them,
but they save a lot too. They have a turtle farm down there where they release hundreds and hundreds
of
years.
I think they're largely farming green turtles down there. We don't get too many of them up here. Most of what we have here are loggerheads. They're the most common. We see a few others now and then. Occasionally Kemp's Ridley and a few things like that.
Hawksbill, leatherbacks,
they farm turtles down there. I believe Grand Cayman's got a turtle farm there. Some of them
do. Huge.
Central America. Yeah.
And in Costa Rica down there, they got so many turtles down there that the other turtles dig up each other's eggs because there's thousands of them. And they even let people eat the eggs for about 1 or 2 days. They can confiscate eggs and eat them. And, of course, a lot of animals hunt the eggs. But there's tens of thousands. Yeah. They're doing quite well there.
Right. Yeah.
But up here, we have challenges. You look at Caswell Beach. Caswell Beach sticks out there on the point where the Cape Fear River is. Yep. It's 600 acres that the Southern Baptist Assembly owned. And that's a really interesting beach to watch. With respect to, looking, and we have really good pictures and documentation from 100 years ago to see what that looks like and how it's shaped. Right. Now, what's your thought on all this saltwater intrusion into Wilmington? We keep dredging the river because it's not a natural deep river. The natural deep harbor is Southport, and there's, there's a lot of debate about why not keep there and stop dredging the Cape Fear River.
Well, you'll recall that the state port entertain the idea of creating a super port down that way with that 600 acres, that they own down there. And from the standpoint of facilitating transportation, on the water, it made a lot of sense. The big problem was that all of the supporting infrastructure, the road net, the rail net, and so forth, would all have to be expanded to go down there. And it was going to cost something like $6 billion. And where we ran, hard aground was that the senatorial delegation from South Carolina and Virginia made it very clear that they would not support federal funding for a port that would compete with theirs. Charleston, Savannah, Norfolk, and so forth. And without federal funding, North Carolina couldn't afford to do that all on its own. But the dredging of the Cape Fear River. Bear in mind the river, as you suggested. Back in the day, the river was 5 to 10 feet deep, with a few places in the channel where it might have been deeper. And as they brought in bigger and bigger boats to do trading, they found that you needed to dredge the river. Now that didn't become really easy to do until modern times, when you had mechanical dredges and real engines and that sort of thing. From about 1900 onward, and the state port here in Wilmington, of course, being 25 miles upriver. Requires the dredging of the channel. And as the shipping business has moved toward larger and larger vessels, especially the big container ships,
the Panamax ships can't even get up
more
there.
Water. So the last dredging project brought the river to a project depth of 37 feet.
Unbelievable.
No, 42. And that had a tremendous impact on the amount of salt water getting up the river.
Yep.
I remember having a kind of debate with the Corps of Engineers, and this still rankles me a bit. I was asked by a reporter from the Star News, is the dredging project, and this is back in the late 90s, is the dredging project going to make the estuary saltier or fresher? And I said, well, pretty simple set of concepts here. The amount of fresh water entering the estuary is pretty much constant, right? It's the river. And so if you increase the volume of the estuary by dredging it deeper and wider, you have, when you dig it deeper, you got to dig the channel wider too to accommodate the slope you need. You're creating a larger volume of water in the estuary. That extra volume will necessarily be made up by salt water coming in, right? I mean, the tides go in and out, and so you keep the freshwater volume input steady, and you'll have to have more salt water in there. It turned out that the Corps of Engineers said, oh, no, our models show that the river estuary will get fresher, which was a stinking pile of manure, as it turned out, because, of course, it got saltier. There's a reason why they didn't want to admit that it would get saltier. And the reason is that saltier water would go farther upstream and would convert the freshwater and oligohaline or barely salt type habitats and marshes into saltier marshes. And that would cause the dieback of the freshwater vegetation, including the cypress trees. And, of course, what do we have now? We have ghost forests, right?
Yep, we do.
All those
man-made, completely man-made. Completely man-made.
Yeah,
and again, it's silly. It is absolutely silly. Yeah. You have a natural deep harbor. You have and look. Plus, the beaches rely on the silt that comes down this river, and instead of making it now to the mouth of the Cape Fear, that silt is being deposited on the riverbed upstream. Yeah, and it's not making it. And
deposited on Eagles Island.
Sure, but that's all of that sand. Would make its way out here and build up Caswell and Bald Head, and the channel goes
and in the great scheme of things, that would be true.
But again, a natural deep harbor that's there, and it's every year that they go doing this is making it. And again, even the U.S. military was smart enough to use Sunny Point. The U.S. military uses that. It's got everything it needs.
They wanted more rapid access to the ocean, for one thing, and they also wanted the security of having nothing around them. Part of the reason that Sunny Point is where it is because the risk of explosion. There's a 2-mile exclusion zone around it, literally a circle, because they have very large quantities of explosive devices there.
So and they use the roads and they use the rail also. They have a rail system that goes in there.
They have a rail spur that goes right to it. But, their exclusion zone actually extends across the river and bumps up against Carolina Beach on the backside of the beach. Carolina Beach has encroached on that exclusion zone a few times, and the Army is not happy about that.
Yeah. The good news for the Army, though, they have gotten better. They've gotten safer. Sunny Point has done better. And you're right. It only takes one screw up. But by and large, they've become better and safer at doing what they do. And I don't know why.
Well, they haven't had an explosion that I'm aware of.
Right.
If they had, I think we'd have known about it.
Yeah. But it's amazing that we're not looking at that deepwater port more. Because if you want to do less damage, it's actually ironic. You'll do less damage by using the deepwater harbor than you would by continually dredging upstream over time.
Oh, yeah. And they proposed to deepen the channel further. There's a proposal wending its way through the approvals, the environmental assessments and all that. to deepen the channel. They've been a little fuzzy about the project depth they're aiming at, but it appears that they want to go to 48 feet.
They'd have to. For Panamax ships to get in there, they'd have to.
Again, is to accommodate these ships. And they also want to dredge through, I think it's called Battery Island. I'm not.
Yeah.
It's the island right off Southport, where the channel itself makes a 90-degree dogleg. Right.
I'm looking at it right now as you're talking to me. I can see that it's a bird island. It's a bird sanctuary.
Island. Okay. Yeah, it's a bird sanctuary. That's right. And so they're going to have trouble getting permission to do that. But they want to. Oh yeah, well, it's.
But they've got a natural deep harbor here.
That's right.
They already have a God-given deep harbor. The Coast Guard station is right here. The pilot boats are right here. You have a deep harbor. The state has land, and they should be looking to the future rather than trying to dredge from the past.
Well, I have floated at them the idea, and I've tried this over and over again, that, let me put it this way. What do ports do when they have a rocky coastline and you can't dredge? And the harbor's not deep enough for these newest, largest ships. What do? You stop being a port.
Yeah, that's true. It goes away.
You bring in what we call lighter ships. A lighter is a smaller vessel that transfers cargo from a deep draft ship offshore to the docks on land. And lighters have been used for literally thousands of years. Even the ancient Mediterranean cultures knew that it was efficient to ship stuff across the sea on big ships. But when you got close to the coast, and of course they couldn't dredge, you'd use smaller vessels to ferry the cargo and stuff ashore.
Dr. Cahoon, we need to go. We're top of the hour, but I appreciate your time. Always a pleasure.
Sure.
And we'll have you on again for the Cape Fear Riverwatch.org, I believe. Is that the correct? Cape Fear Riverwatch.org. It's Cape Fear Riverwatch.org. Yeah. Thank you so much. Folks, have a great day. We'll be back bright and early tomorrow.
Okay. All right.
You're tuned in to the Big Talker Network, Wilmington, North Carolina's premier internet station for news and talk radio programming. Find us online at bigtalker.live.
Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, located at 8210 River Road, Southport, is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. With the Tackle Box open Monday through Saturday, 7 to 6. Marine Service Pro is a full Suzuki and Tohatsu